Okay, the first disclaimer, the sun is leaving me. The second disclaimer, is this a video essay? I don't really know. The term is very, very broad on this website. Is there a thesis? Kinda. Yes, I guess that's what the title is for, but I think my old professors would probably argue that it's not a very solid thesis. Is it backed by any reputable sources? Not at all. Is this informative or educational? Nope. Not even a little bit. This is just a woman who has just recently watched Pride and Prejudice 2005 for the first time in a while and is just losing her mind just a little bit in a good way. But I have to talk about it now. What is love? What's love? Anybody in the class wanna tell me? What is it? How do you have people go from zero, where you are complete and utter strangers on this big old rock of a planet that we are on, which isn't really that big when you think about the universe as a whole, this ever-expanding universe with no end, don't have an existential crisis about it. How do you have two people meet each other and go from 0 to 1,000, where I should say, I know that more than two people can be in love with each other, but just for the sake of simplicity, how do you have two people go from 0 to 1,000 where these two whole individuals decide that I want to spend my days with you, especially when you compare how long the universe has existed, however fleeting amount of days that I have, I want to spend them with you and everything that comes with you. Everything that comes with you for the rest of my days. Doesn't matter how long the relationship actually lasts, but just at some point, two people decide that. Two whole people come together and decide that I want to spend my days with you. Emotionally, physically, I don't just mean sexually there, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, whatever that means for those two people. How do you get from 0 to 1,000? What is it about love that drives people to that point? I don't know, and that sounds like a philosophy question, and I took one semester of philosophy, but I do know, that I like watching characters in media go from 0 to 1,000. And for me, what's even better is when characters go from like a solid negative 557 to 0 to 1,000. Also known, at least to me, as now, the trope is what it says on the tin. You have characters that go from enemies to lovers. You watch that progression over a plot arc or several plot arcs. Now, for me, the enemies part of it doesn't have to be like, oh, I literally hate when that bitch breathes. It doesn't have to be that intense for me to find enjoyment in the initial setup. It doesn't. It can just be irritants to lovers, which is mostly where Pride and Prejudice 2005, and I'm sure the book, but again, I haven't read the book, but that is where Pride and Prejudice 2005 starts off. And one thing about having couples start at this level where they're enemies is that you already have this like friction, and I need to not knock my knuckles together like that because it hurt a little bit. You already have this tension, this friction between the two of them that I think it's not always missing when you have them initially be strangers that are kind of on neutral ground first. I don't really think that's necessarily true, but I do think that there's just added tension where you're like, ooh. And with Pride and Prejudice 2005, that kicks off when Mr. Darcy is kind of on his Gossip Girl and is talking about Lizzie and her looks, which, have you seen Keira Knightley? But whatever. She overhears it. And then Lizzie does the thing that every non-confrontational person would have loved to do when they had a bit of an argument or had a rude comment directed their way in real life, where you're like, where you walk away, you're just like, oh, I wish I had said, if I had said that one thing. Lizzie says that one thing, and then she gets to walk off. And I replay that part so many times. Please, I love it so much. I'm just like, yes, get him. And he looks a little struck, you know, and I'm gonna get to the looks. The section, I'm gonna get there. That kicks off our enemies to lovers dance with the two of them. And I call it a dance because with this particular adaptation, I don't know if others do it. I can't mention that note more. But they have this back and forth where within scenes themselves, you have a bit of a baby step forward and then a couple steps back. Baby step forward, a couple steps back when it comes to the progression of their relationship to inch closer and closer to the lover section. Like, for example, when it comes to scenes within a scene is the second dance that they go to. And you have the back and forth of couple steps backward. Oh, Lizzie is looking for Mr. Wickham, not Mr. Darcy. Oh, you see him in the background trying to seek her out. He asked her, she doesn't really seem that fond about really dancing with him. Oh, they're actually dancing and now they're arguing. Oh, in the argument, they literally lose themselves and lose their surroundings. And then they depart and they didn't really end on good terms. You have that kind of setup happen for a good chunk of the movie and within scenes themselves. And it's just so much fun to kind of have this, lean in, lean out. Lean in, lean out. It's so much fun and it's just so much tension between the two of them that it's great. And the thing about this particular iteration of Enemies to Lovers, what revs up the tension even more for these characters is when it comes to the performances and the subtlety in the performances. Cause man, this is the section where I'm going to lose my mind just a little bit, okay? Please bear with me. Or don't, I'm gonna talk about it anyway. So one thing I would hear a couple times in classes or when people ask about my old conservatory is, what is it about acting that people like so much? What is it? And one cliche answer that a couple of teachers that I know don't really enjoy is the stepping into other people's shoes. And one reason they don't usually enjoy it is because it kind of makes it seem as if you can become another person, which I guess depending on whatever method a specific actor uses is whether they believe it or not. But I would say is one reason why I would give that answer sometimes is one, because a little less obnoxious and more shorthand for what I really would like to say is that human beings are really fascinating. And that makes me sound like an alien doing a study on humanity. Learning about a character in a script or in a playbook allows you to try and figure out and piece together what it is about them, their mannerisms, their memory, their upbringing, like their wants and needs. What is it about the history of them and everything that makes them up, that makes them behave a specific way around people, places, and things, and themselves? What is it? How do you figure that out? And a lot of acting is figuring that out. And Keira Knightley and Matthew Macfadyen make me wonder about Elizabeth Bennet's and Mr. Darcy's interactions with each other so intensely. So intensely. And I think it's also a credit to the writing and the editing and direction, I'm sure. But something about their performances just makes you want to hone in on the smallest of things. And it's so great. For just great. I picked such an elegant word, but it is. There's so much subtlety that it kind of allows the viewer to not be a sleuth, because you can get what's happening, but just not only the honing in, it just adds even more tension because of just how monumental the smallest of things are. There's a scene where Lizzie is visiting Jane at, where Mr. Darcy and Bingley and his sister are visiting. And she sits down, they have a bit of a discussion about what makes an accomplished woman. And Mr. Darcy is kind of just having a conversation about it. And at one point he just adds, and she must improve her mind with a sense of reading, and just has the slightest glance to Lizzie reading. I know it doesn't sound like much, But please, when Lizzie is leaving, if you've seen the movie and you are as intense about this movie as I am, you already know what part I'm about to talk about, okay? You already know what part I'm about to talk about. But when Lizzie is leaving and Mr. Darcy holds her hand as she gets into the carriage, and the way Lizzie looks at the gesture, his facial expression completely trying his hardest to be neutral, but on the walk away, his hand does the thing. Even if you're not like me, spending the past couple minutes talking about one little stretched out hand, the scene and the framing of it and the fact that the camera holds on it is gonna have the viewer going oh, what was that? Also, this thing where they will look at each other's lips while they're arguing, and I need Keira Knightley and Matthew McFadden to know that drove me crazy every single time they would argue and they would look at each other's lips. And during the proposal, which is the one that everybody focuses on, but it happens multiple times, man. It happens multiple times. But when it happens during the proposal and you're like, wait a second, because they're just being drawn into each other. One thing about all these subtle touches and looks and the focus on them by the director's choices and the actors' performances means that they build up on each other, just on top of each other. So when you do get scenes like Mr. Darcy basically asking her hey, if what you felt about me in the first proposal is the same, then just tell me and I'm gone. When that camera holds on Lizzie's face in complete silence, it is like you are hearing a monologue. And so when you get to the point where she holds his hands, and one of the many hyperfocuses of the gestures in that scene says they're cold, it means the world. It is such an admission of love because you've been seeing how the looks and glances have been soft admissions to it already. This movie has made me go on a bit of a nonsensical ramble about this because watching the way that this movie conveys the irritants to lovers route and the back and forth with it, where there's just so much tension between that back and forth, between that dance, with literal dances, literal baby steps forward and backwards, with all of it coming together seamlessly and very just such... Can I even talk? Because of the performances and because of how much subtext the actors, and I'm sure the script, but the actors are putting into the smallest of looks and the smallest of hand gestures and any kind of gesture, that it just intensifies actual gestures. Like, Mr. Darcy helping her family. It intensifies those and intensifies actual admissions of love. That everything about their interactions it just intensifies everything about. I can't. It's such a good movie. It's so, honestly, with the title, this probably be why is Pride and Prejudice so romantic? Maybe, but that's redundant. Or why is Pride and Prejudice so... would be more accurate, but that would not make sense as the title. But it's probably more accurate to what I actually spent the time rambling about. It is such a great exploration of enemies to lovers. It is such a great exploration of subtlety in showing love, in performing love, and I love it. I love it so much. I've talked way too much. Okay, bye!